Worm is a web serial by J.C. McCrae, also known as Wildbow. You can read Worm in its original format by visiting parahumans.wordpress.com or donate to Wildbow's Patreon at patreon.com/wildbow. This story isn't intended for young or sensitive readers. Readers who are on the lookout for trigger warnings are advised to give Worm a pass. For a complete list, check the description for all of Worm's trigger warnings.
Good morning, Brockton Bay. Grab your books and get ready to get shook. It's Arc 3.
All right. Thank you, Alan,
Let's
for
go.
that lovely introduction.
It was good.
Welcome back, everyone. We're into, as Alan so eloquently put, into Arc 3 of Worm, an exciting arc here. We're going to get the ball rolling into our discussions of the arc with everybody and go from there. So I think it's probably a good idea to jump right into Kat and Taylor's initial reactions being our first-time readers. What did you guys think? Just sort of ballpark, big picture reactions to this exciting arc.
I thought that this arc was really getting into some of the meat of like how it seems the story's going to go, like some of the action, more interactions directly versus just talking about other capes. We're starting to see like how the dynamic between the different groups of good guy capes it happens, and like their the undersiders, their interaction, like how their dynamic is with the other capes. And I almost didn't have any notes to take because I was just so enthralled in the story that was happening. So I am really excited to talk about certain segments, but I feel like I was just so grasped by like how things were developing that the basically the homework portion of it seemed to like go away from my mind. What about you, Taylor?
Ladies and gentlemen, we had plot, we had action, we had superheroes, we had supervillains, we had everything that I was promised already in the third arc. I am so excited. I was so excited, like you said, to kind of lean away from the undersiders, see what some of the other capes are doing. Definitely seeing Taylor, not me, but the character develop and kind of figure out what she's going to do with her life, while I try and figure out what I do in my life. So this is just great. I'm loving it. We're having a great time.
Yeah, and opening it up to everybody else, kind of just get some scattered reactions.
No, this is a very fun arc. It's one of those arcs that's so early that after you've read the whole thing, you can kind of forget those cool little details. But going back into it and going back through the bank heist scene and the lead up to it, and really getting to know these characters more on what feels like a personal level, it's just really fun. The interlude is one of my favorites because you get a peek into a different side of the world than Taylor's perspective, which we'll get to later, I'm sure. But yeah, just some great character interaction, great superpowers explored as well. Some really cool stuff here.
Yeah, this is the spawning point for the rest of the series in my mind. Having talked it over with, Jacob, like if the, first two arcs haven't grabbed you by now, like this is where everything comes out of for like the rest of the series. I can point back and be like, when did that start? That started at the bank. Like that started in that chapter. And I forget, as always, how quickly we get to this.
Yeah, we do. We get. I was thinking the same thing when I read it. I was like, I remember this happened, and I remember it happened early on, but I forgot how how early it happened. And yeah, you nailed it. We kind of just jump right in. Like this is the pace setter for the rest of the next. Honestly, the kind of the rest of the whole book, but the rest of the series immediately after for sure. Uh, what a fun chapter.
One of the fun things too is just coming back to this as well after having read the whole thing. There are lots of names dropped in this chapter, and I want to focus in on that maybe for predictions later once we get to the predictions part. But there are lots of big names dropped in this chapter or in this arc. So I'm interested to see if people caught on to that again, and if our newer readers, if they what they think of those name drops and what they think they might be. And I forget. Yeah, that happens early. These names get dropped early.
And there's so
Things
many
happen fast.
to build off of that there, and this kind of goes into stuff we've talked about earlier with the way Wildbow sort of world builds, but not just names, but events and things that just sort of get subtly dropped. I was joking with Alan. We were talking about this earlier. How I forgot it was this arc where just casually, offhand, they're just sitting in the Undersiders' like little hideout, and like, and we spent the rest of the day watching movies from the alternate Earth when Portal was ripped through reality, and now we just share films and movies back and forth.
Yeah.
And then it just goes right by that.
Okay, we're gonna start with this. Okay, I thought this would come up later.
No,
I mean, we can move. We can circle back to it.
Yeah, let's definitely circle back to it
Yeah.
because this was something that Taylor and I both were like, "Excuse me."
I was like, Earth Aleph, but yeah, we'll get to that. Don't even worry about that.
Okay, we'll circle back. But yeah, just the world building is a lot of fun. He does such a great job sort of fleshing out this world. It makes it feel so lived in and so enriched with events
Yeah.
and names and characters, things that aren't going to be mentioned or touched on till later, if at all, which is exciting.
Yep, absolutely.
Something I really liked about this arc is they have the the cops and robbers conversation that that Tattletale and Taylor end up having. And I love that this is because I've read this before, I remember some pieces, but I never remember when they come in. So like I didn't remember the bank heist happening this early, which is just perfect. I love it. But that conversation too is such a great thing to have so early on in the book to like really grasp how the world sees, the capes in general, like the heroes and the villains and how we view them, and kind of how the government has to operate within that space of like, well, we have all these villains and we have all of these heroes, and like how are we supposed to interact with each other and function in a society with all of us together, and kind of like this maybe game within a game kind of subtly put out there by Lisa, and I love it. I think it really sets a good tone for how we're going to see capes throughout the book, and how we're going to see Taylor, trying to figure herself out and try to determine, playing the mole in the Undersiders basically. So,
Yep, absolutely. Maybe we should jump into the summary of the arc so that we could go through chronologically.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Hannah, did you write anything specifically for this arc?
I've got a little breakdown here. You want me to go through the whole thing, breaking down the entire arc, or should we go by section by section?
Let's do section by section.
Yeah, I like section. Let's do sections at a time. See if we have any thoughts as we go through them.
Okay, cool. So first up, we have part one. Taylor jogs in the morning and meets up with Brian, where they kind of talk over breakfast. She goes into school, and it doesn't go very well, and she flees at Sophia's taunts.
Yeah, I was very surprised. I thought that the school arc, which I know that it'll probably, my prediction is it will come back again, but I was surprised that it kind of got dropped so quickly.
I feel
Yeah.
like she's like giving up on school. Like she's like, I'll go to school. One thing happens and she's like, yeah, fuck this. Like it's just not worth it.
Oh yeah.
And I find that kind of, I'm wondering, especially after learning about Brian and how he is going to school like online and stuff. I don't think she's going to be in high school for much longer.
Which is good because there's something I picked up on rereading episode one, arc one, again, but just before this, um, Taylor gives off really strong school shooter vibes. Like, just kind of the everything about her. And there's a moment all the way back when she's dealing with Lung where like she gets the upper hand on him and is kind of giggling and laughing to herself about how she's kicking his ass. And
This
and
also
that happens again in this arc as well.
Yeah.
exactly. And it's
Mhm.
like the more and more I
Good
think
things.
about it, I'm like, man, this really is like, we are the one bad day. The one day that just goes a little bit too far from
Yeah.
her essentially doing a school shooting, but with bugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that's part of why that limit that she put on herself, because she still wants to be a hero, she wants to be a good guy. That limiter has really saved her from becoming somebody like
Yeah.
Lung or like some of the other villains that have been name dropped. But yeah, I think Kat, you make a good point that in the context of her leaving school, uh, she this is immediately after hearing from Brian, oh, Lisa got her GED and Alec finished it on his own way, and I'm taking online classes, and it's all cool. Like, she's hearing about all these alternative options that don't involve her being around these bullies anymore. She's like,
Mm,
oh, that sounds kind of nice. I can
yeah.
easily understand why she'd want to, just leave and be like, you know what? Screw this. I'm going to go hang out with people who actually like me. Maybe they're bad
Yeah.
guys, but they're better than you people.
And it's
Definitely.
Even
almost
as a
go ahead.
so even as just a general description for the entirety of this book, like that's Brian is showing her like, hey, look, there's literally all of these alternative ways to accomplish the goal that you want to do. You want to graduate school, there's literally 5 other options.
It's very much I'm treating it as though they're athletes. Like if you were to use this in the real life, she is totally just like, you know what? Baseball is what I want to do.
Yeah.
That's going to get me there. I'm just going to take rocks for jocks in college just so that I can have a major, but this is what I want to do. And she is doubling down on the Cape. She is going all for it, and I'm here for it. So
Yeah. Actually, I was gonna say the same thing. She kind of has this weird, like, her motivation for, you finish school and then maybe you go to college and you have an idea of what you want to be or who you want to be. But when you get your powers and all of a sudden you have this ability to control bugs, like, what is the point of school if you're going to be a hero? Like, do you need school? Do you need college? Do you need any of it? And kind of this well, it all feels pointless, especially if Taylor's getting bullied at school. Kind of the question of like, well, do I even need to go back to school? Of like, do I need to even think about it? And that kind of played off with this. Well, the undersiders are all, they have their GED and they're taking classes. And you would think that, like, oh, yes, well, the hoodlums are like, oh, yes, who needs school? But like, no,
Yeah.
they all have their GED
could-
and he's taking classes and they haven't just kind of resorted to the villain life, basically.
Right. And we could imagine maybe an alternate world too, where instead of the Undersiders being the ones who rescue her, what if it were the Wards?
Mm,
Because the reason
Mm.
she doesn't want to join the Wards is she's thinking, well, that's just more teenage drama. I get
Yeah.
enough of that at school. Why do I want that? But then she ends up with basically a group of teenagers who like her. But what if it had been the Wards who had found her
mm,
instead? And you kind of can go into that. It's circumstantial who she ended up joining in a way, but it's kind of adds to that what if mentality that I like to use sometimes.
And I think you touched on a really a good point at the end too, Nick, when you were saying how comparing school and the Undersiders, she's going, yeah, the Undersiders are villains, but they're not worse than my bullies, which I think
yeah.
is an interesting dynamic too. How she recognizes that they're not the best people in terms of what they do, but compared to where she's been, it's infinitely better. And I think
Mhm.
it's funny too, because up until obviously this arc kind of changes that, but up until that
Yeah.
point, early on,
Bullies are worse than bank robbers, Jacob.
yeah,
That's what.
yeah,
I remember
yeah,
that adage.
yeah.
Yes.
Agreed.
Mhm.
But up until the bank robbery, like the Undersiders don't do anything that we've seen that really warrant them being villains that we're aware of, other than the little bit of research she's done. But but yeah, in terms of her interactions with them, they seem like good people, aside from probably Bitch. But
And then, except for Arms Master drops the little. I don't know if that happened. I don't remember the order of things in the arc. I don't know when that happened.
little bit later.
We'll get to
Yeah,
that.
okay.
So that's
Yeah.
actually a great transition into chapter 2, which we
Whoa,
are
whoa,
back
before we move on. Before we
Okay.
move on.
All right,
Because
excuse
we
me.
got to acknowledge, Hot Brian is hot.
Mm.
Oh, Hot
yeah,
Brian is hot.
He's very hot.
Okay,
How
I'm
old
sorry.
is Brian?
Brian's
Like
like what, 2-3 years older than Taylor?
I want to
Yeah,
say he's
he-
18 or 19.
I think he's supposed to be
Yeah.
like just turned 18.
Okay.
Mhm.
Good.
Oh my gosh.
That's all.
Well,
Listen,
okay,
from
so
Taylor's perspective, Brian is hot, and she's obviously is developing a little crush on him.
yeah.
And why wouldn't she?
Sure.
And why
Well, why
wouldn't
not?
she?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Which again, I was gonna say ties into chapter 2, where we have some hand-to-hand practice, where Taylor gets to spar with Brian back at the hideout, and we have a little conversation about this about the sponsor of the Undersiders. But that hand-to-hand, let's go! Any chance to like spar with Brian? Like, let's go! I'm here for it.
Brian dropped one of the best pieces of advices for fighting that I've ever had or like ever heard like a real person say. But he's like, look, if you're going to do martial arts, if you're going to do any high level of fighting, keeping up with it is going to be a full-time job, and there are still going to be masters that are going to kick your ass. Literally, he's like, just pop into these places, learn a few things, pop out, move on. And I was like, okay, thank you. Thank you, Brian.
That makes me feel so much better for dropping out of
stand with
jujitsu.
Brian.
Yes, when I was 11 years old, this is the advice I needed when I was 11 years old and dropped out of Taekwondo to play baseball.
Oh man, I love it.
Yeah.
You can be a jack of all trades for sure.
It's true. Well, yeah, and honestly, whenever a sparring session comes up between two characters who may or may not have a thing for each other, all I can think of is Mass Effect. And
I love it.
Oh, that Mass Effect keeps my mass erect.
No!
yeah.
Oh my god!
I had reach. She had
had
flexibility.
flexibility.
That's right.
Oh my god!
Michael, I hope you're noting the timestamps here. Just
No,
So
you
that
gotta
you can
keep it in. You
boost
gotta
the
keep it in. You
volume on
gotta keep
those.
it in.
You get a 10-second mute for that one.
What?
10-second mute.
What?
Okay,
Anyway.
no, but really though, let's hear. I'm
I like
actually.
to think. Well,
Oh, sorry,
sorry,
go ahead.
not to cut you off, but I was
No,
just,
please go
just
ahead.
before we move past it. I like to think, because we are reading the story from Taylor's perspective, so we don't really get to see inside the minds of the other Undersiders that often. But when I was reading this, part of me does read like Brian does put in a little extra weight behind his punches on Alec when Taylor comes in, as he quickly works to take him down. Like, here's your easy lessons, and then you're down. Oh, hey, Taylor.
Just a subtle flex there. I
Yeah.
love it.
Well, it's been clear, at least from the beginning, that we don't know that he has feelings for her or anything, but he clearly cares about her. I mean, he's been I think Taylor even said, like, he's basically the only reason she stayed.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so clearly he cares about her.
Like, even if a romantic situation doesn't evolve from this, like, they're clearly becoming friends, which is something that Taylor has desperately needed and hasn't really experienced in a while. So, and she probably just doesn't know how to like approach it because, like, obviously Emma was her friend, her best friend, and now things have completely, like, she's completely using her biggest um like emotional like traumas against her, and I'm just interested to see how Taylor continues to evolve these friendships with the Undersiders because of that.
Is this the arc where the weird TV thing is mentioned? Because she's hanging out with the Undersiders, or the chapter?
Yeah.
Yes,
That
yes.
is going to be
this is this
3-4.
section, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because like,
So,
for what is it, 3.3, 3.4 is
3.4?
kind of a lot of exposition right there.
Yeah.
interdimensional television, like Rick and Morty.
Exactly. So if you don't mind, I'll bring this up first because I wanted to talk about it, and then we can immediately get to Professor Haywire. But in 3.3, we mention the Manton effect.
Yes.
Which and I
Yes.
wanted to hear people talk about that before we talk about the different Earths that we have going on. But basically, it made it seem like, hey, for some reason, we have this Manton effect where superheroes' powers can't necessarily interact with other superheroes, except some heroes can affect them, and it seems to be like a set of rules going on.
Yeah.
So I was super excited to kind of see like the world building going on.
Yeah. This is one of those examples where Wildbow has come up with an answer and a system for everything.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
just all those things where you're like, well, why doesn't the Human Torch light himself on fire? All the questions you've ever had about any superhero in any universe. The Manton effect is this huge catch-all for so many things.
And it's so simple. And this goes back in. I feel like we're gonna do this a lot, but we love Wildbow. We love the way he writes, and it's such a simple plot device that doesn't break anything. It just exists to explain something that really doesn't need to be explained. I mean, no, like you said, no
Yeah.
other property has ever tried to explain this or worried about it. Because at the end of the day, we really don't care. Like, we're enjoying superheroes doing their thing. Like, we don't really care about all the
Yeah, we
science
don't need to
behind it.
break down the
Yeah.
science. Yeah.
Exactly. But the fact that he puts it in, the fact that it exists is just it's so simple, and it just answers that question that we didn't need answered, but in doing so enriches the world that we're reading about. And
It leads
provides
6
context.
nerds to make a podcast.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
That's right.
Exactly. And it adds in too, there's this hint that some of the most powerful superheroes will be the ones who can bypass the Manton effect, like
Mm,
Panacea, which comes up later.
mm.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Kind of gives that omega level mutant type threat.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. So
But are we
Yeah.
sticking with little fun little call outs? You said you wanted, Taylor, you had some thoughts on Earth Aleph?
Yes.
I literally, and you already mentioned it because you said this earlier, it was a single sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
That made me so mad where he's like, oh, like we send them shows, they send us shows, and the first 2 Star Wars movies, they still weren't great. And I was like, Taylor, I'm about to beat your ass. If you insult my Lord and Savior George Lucas one more time.
The fact that they just dropped, like Wildbow just dropped that in and moved on.
Yeah, it's
Just-
such a
just-
random little.
Just Salt Bay. Just,
It
just a little
made
sprinkle.
me actually kind of question, like, did I miss something earlier in the book? Because he's using a little bit, like, a lot of times world building in fantasies can over explain. It just feels like they're just constantly hyper describing absolutely everything around them. And I feel like he's almost using this like less is more method where it's like acting like you already know. And then eventually you'll know because things will keep getting sprinkled in. But instead of, going through these long descriptions of, how this world is different than what we're currently, used to, it's like, oh yeah, this it just does it so casually. And then
Mhm.
eventually I'm sure we'll get more later, which I think that this Professor Haywire will be one of those name drops that you guys were talking about that will come up later on.
Save it for the prediction section at the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah, with that, it just makes me think of a conversation I had with a writer friend of mine, and talking about treating the reader as incredibly stupid or incredibly smart. Kind of like, well, I don't need to explain this to you in depth. I don't need to take an entire, chapter to explain this. You guys will get it. I don't have to spell it out for you. And I love that because it really does feel like you said, Kai, it doesn't feel like, he's waxing on and on and on about this. He can just sprinkle it in, and it's like we already know it. Like, it's already part of normalcy that we are just a part of, by peeking into Taylor's world. But like, we're not being treated like idiots that need to have everything explained to us. It's like, as it comes up, there it is. And, okay, oh yeah, Earth Aleph. And we're like, what? And then, a little bit later, it'll give us a little something else. Oh yeah, Professor Haywire. It's like, oh, all right, okay, let's go. And I don't feel like I'm, being talked down to be like, okay, well, silly reader, let me explain to you how this complex world actually is. Like, it feels so smooth.
It's just big dick energy on Wildbow's part. Wildbow,
Yeah.
you have a massive dick. Like, literally just being like, oh, like, that's just the Manton effect. Or,
yeah.
they just get it from Earth Aleph. Like, it's just, sir, good job.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think for writers, we call it big pen energy.
Big
Heck
pen
yeah,
energy.
Big pen energy. Or I guess big keyboard energy, since it's a web serial.
Maybe.
Well, yeah, we could do this all night. But I will say another part of this chapter right before we close it out. Honestly, the conversation with the dad went exactly like I thought it would. I know that they'll probably have an explosive plot episode whenever he finds out she's skipping school. But literally, this is just classic, just parent trying to ignore the problem, but also trying to figure out what's going on, and then child trying to just tiptoe around it.
Oh man, that's such a hard line. And I think because we got that perspective from Danny, where we learned that he did explode once, and that scared the crap out of his daughter. That now, if he hadn't have done that, maybe they could be a bit more honest. But now she's so afraid that he might explode, or he's gonna, do something crazy, that she is a bit more wary of talking to him. And yet he obviously still loves her and wants to know. So he's like trying to get in there in little ways, but not really push too hard. And that's just, it's kind of heartbreaking in its own way.
So alongside with that, something that weird about Taylor's family that I don't think I realized, and maybe I misread this, but because of the nature of how her mother died, we find out that it's because she was texting and driving, nobody else to blame but her, so it's kind of rough. Taylor doesn't have a cell phone.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's not like it's the story's a bit dated, but still every one of the other kids has a phone and Taylor doesn't. And she doesn't even really worry too much about it, except for like the 2 times where like cell phones would be like desperately needed because I'm about to get killed. Like, and I think, that one of those weird things where like she's never had one, and that's probably because of her dad, maybe more than her. But she's just kind of always gone with it. But
I mean,
anger
who's she gonna text? She doesn't have any friends.
That's true.
Her dad.
Yeah.
Well, she doesn't even talk to him. Like, what would she need a phone for?
Yeah.
Well, she needs a phone now.
Yeah, she does.
Didn't she get one? Didn't she get one from the end? She
Brian
did.
gives her one. Or 2?
Brian gives her 3.
Yeah.
Oh, is it 3?
It's like 2 burners and one to call you on.
That's right. That's right. So we've kind of moved into 3.3 here with the that a little bit, but also the bank job, vote and planning, and them talking about some of that stuff.
Yes. I will admit that this is some of the funniest superhero naming, because obviously with Glory Girl last arc, I immediately thought of a joke, which immediately gets brought up this arc.
Yes.
And then we get the clock blocker.
Oh, yes.
This is big pin energy from Wildbow.
Which is absolutely a name that a teenager would give themselves as a
I love
superhero.
it.
And that's what I love about it.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh,
So
yeah.
and with the funny names, I loved, like, literally, like, told Kat in the middle of reading it, I was like, wait, look at this. Like, the way that they talk about, like, this one's a tinker. Oh, this one has the Alexandria package. I love that so much. Like, I don't know if it's my humane need to classify everything, but I love the superhero classification so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And once again, it's like one of those worlds where like, oh my gosh, the Zeds or the Walking Dead are here. Like nobody's ever seen a zombie before or know generally how zombies operate. Like,
Right.
these guys live in a world that would, oh, we've got superheroes. We're gonna like classify them. We're gonna go, oh, you've got the Alexandria package. Like they've seen superhero movies. They have superheroes. They're not gonna say they're not superheroes. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the names you can kind of tell, like maybe who came up with their own name versus who was
Who was
maybe
given a name.
suggested a name. Like Kid Win and Clock Blocker, those two came up with their own names.
oh my gosh.
Oh, I love it so much.
Whereas I could see like Aegis and Gallant, maybe somebody being like,
Yeah.
hey, here's an idea for a name, and they're like, yes, that is me.
Yeah,
But-
like an adult.
Gallon specifically sounds like that's a name his parents gave him, which
Yeah.
the little bit we know
Mhm.
about his story
Mhm.
sort of checks out. Like, you're
Absolutely.
a rich son to rich parents, and everybody, you got he was given his name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And right after that, Taylor has a meeting with Arms Master,
Yeah.
Mm.
which
Yeah,
made
so-
me feel so old.
Yeah, that gets us into 3.4 and 3.5 with the meeting with Arms Master. And yeah.
I loved this scene.
I did too.
Hmm.
Because oh my god, did her immaturity and naivety come out
Yes.
so hard in this conversation with
Yes.
Arms Master. Like
Yeah.
her whole just like I'm undercover, and he's like, no, you're not. Like, for who? Like, what are you even?
For
You're
what?
you're literally asking me for permission to
Yeah.
commit a crime. Like,
Yeah.
so-
Yeah.
You're a literal child.
You're asking Super Cop if you can go commit a crime.
And that's where
You
my
arrest you
age.
right now, you idiot.
Yes, my age got the better of me so bad because I remember being a teenage boy in the high school cafeteria eating just like, if terrorists come through those window, I've got them. Like we've all admit, I was
Every
like, I got
daydream in
this.
church.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
literally just hearing her talk to Arms Master, I'm speaking as him, just like people die. Like literally, this is a life or death thing. And you're just treating it like, no, like I'll find out who Big Boss is, which also forgot about that. Who's funding
Hmm.
this?
Mm.
Oh, prediction. Save it for the prediction.
I'll save it.
Where does the money come from?
Yeah, exactly. Where's it coming from? Is Donald Trump in this universe too?
Follow the
anyways.
money.
But yeah, I felt like an old man, just like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I'm King Triton.
Exactly. I was going to say it's the Ariel situation.
Yes.
It is such a. This is one of those things where he's so good at writing not one-sided characters
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
I totally am on Taylor's side. She wants to do this thing. He just won't let her. And you know what? I feel like she's kind of justified a little bit. And at the same time, I also am with Arms Master because, like, what is this child doing? Asking RoboCop to commit a crime? Like, his hand is twitching on that gun. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
this
yeah.
isn't
Oh,
like
yeah.
a little crime either. This
It's
is
a big
like
crime.
oh,
Yeah.
it's a huge freaking crime. And she's literally like, oh, it'll be fine. Like, I agree with like the because the idea that like she's making this bank heist, this basically like not a big deal in her head. And I'm like, could you imagine just and again, this is like aging us. Like we're all obviously way into getting it adults here because my head is like, could you imagine if you found out that your kid robbed a bank?
Your 15-year-old daughter
yeah.
robbed a bank.
What? Like,
Oof.
and for what? Like, what was the reason? Oh, because I'm like trying to like figure out what the bad guy, and I'll be like, you fucking stupid.
And don't
Like,
don't worry about it,
child.
Dad. I'm gonna undercover the criminal organization all on my own.
Oh,
It'll be
All
fine.
alone.
You
And like
dummy.
with Arms Master, like for him, he's probably like, yeah, if you're telling me that you have information, give me that information right now, and I can stop this bank heist. And like, you could come join the wards, like probably still like you have information right now. Why won't you give me information right
She's
now?
like, no.
Yeah, exactly. Because she wants to be friends with them still. She wants
Yeah.
to
Yep.
be on both sides because she's starting to like the Undersiders. So
Yeah.
she doesn't want to completely give it away that she isn't on their side because I think subconsciously she is. So
And her
Yeah.
final lines in that chapter too, I think, just illustrate that, where she's like, "And I'm gonna rob the hell out of this bank."
And not only am I gonna rob the hell out of it, I'm gonna tell Miss Militia all
Yeah, I'm
the
gonna tell Miss
information.
Militia.
right.
Yeah.
Such a teenager thing.
It
to
is such
do.
a teenage like loyalties. Like I love it.
Yeah.
It's she's just like, oh, well, okay,
You're not
well,
my favorite
fine.
superhero
You're not my-
anymore.
Yeah,
Exactly,
he is the
exactly.
Mr. Gladly
Though.
of superheroes right now.
Absolutely.
You sir,
I do
suck.
like too though how we get a hint that part of the reason Arms Master is so standoffish is because Taylor finds out that when he took the credit for taking down Lung and then Lung almost died,
Yeah,
like
Yep.
that came back on him, and so
exactly.
he comes into this already upset at her, but not really being justified in being upset at her. So that definitely doesn't help him either. Again, this is kind of my what if thinking, but I wonder if he'd come in a bit calmer and more rational and hadn't been so upset at her, if that would have changed her mind at all. Because part of
Yeah.
what ends up happening is she's like, being a teenager, but reasonably, she's like, well, you've been an asshole to me. I'm going to prove you wrong, you know? And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
kind of get
exactly.
that. It's
Mhm.
like, I don't want to do something until you tell me that I can't or shouldn't. And then
Right.
Arms
exactly.
Master is the most authoritarian character that you can be, just because in my mind, he's RoboCop, and
Yeah.
it's just like when he's like, "Don't do that," like immediately the gut instinct is like, "Oh, I'm gonna do the hell out of that."
Totally gonna do that now.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I got the Incredibles vibes from, Buddy when he's a kid, before he syndrome.
Yes,
And he's
Yeah.
like,
yes.
"Go home, buddy," and then that's the beginning of his villain origin story.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh, this is what we're getting for Taylor." Like this for sure is her going to be a villain. I still think anti-hero though, because I don't think she's suddenly going to be like, "Yeah, I'm okay with killing people," because she's so against that part. But I feel like she's going to be like, "I don't care about committing crimes as much as long as I'm not like hurting people or,
Right.
And I think her motives will be more. I think that's obviously it's going to be more gray as we go, but I think again, I still think
I'm gonna let you
anti-hero.
finish. I'll let you finish. But did you finish the arc?
Yes.
Uh,
No, I'm
We're
joking.
talking.
Just because I do love how Taylor. Because I 100% agree with you. I think that's exactly where her mind is. But then we get into the bank heist. Not to jump
Yeah.
ahead a couple chapters here, and I mean, to me, she begins to enjoy herself maybe a little too much
Exactly.
in her intimidation of the hostages and her confrontation towards the end there. Um, so yeah,
I
no,
think she
I
likes
think you're absolutely right.
being powerful. I think she likes
Mm.
being powerful
Yeah.
against other people with
Uh-huh.
powers.
Yes, I
I don't
agree.
think I think because having power over the hostages, I think made her feel good, but I don't think that I mean, obviously y'all have read it before, but I'm just thinking like she's not suddenly going to be like it's going to be a long time before she's like accepting of like the possibility of people dying on her
Yeah.
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
Well, I agree.
Yeah.
And I think actually that whole power thing is just
Yes.
something that just comes to mind. She doesn't like it when she has to take control of the hostages and scare them. But
Mm.
when other heroes who she perceives as more powerful than her are being harmed, that's when it starts to be like, oh, I'm beating somebody better than me. And I think
Mhm.
Mm.
power for her is really important because of the whole
Yes.
bullying dynamic.
Yes, yes, yes,
She
yes, yes.
knows she knows what it's like to be bullied. She doesn't want to use her powers to hurt people who can't fight back. But when it comes to like Aegis, who is clearly
Yes.
nearly invincible, and he's
Right.
getting bullied
Uh-huh.
around, it's kind of like, oh hey, now I'm beating people who are stronger than me, theoretically, who are better than me.
Who
I'm
potentially deserve it.
exactly.
Too.
And it's this idea of like I'm
Punching up.
more yeah, punching up, exactly. That's the phrase.
hmm
Yeah. She doesn't want
Yeah.
to punch down yet, but she's very much okay with punching
Well,
up every time.
even with the hostage, like taking, control of that situation and being like, okay, well, I'm suggesting a solution here by having my bugs on everybody. She is still playing, the hero in a sense, because she can keep an eye on everybody. She can, while she might be outwardly threatening people with, venomous spider bites, like she's actively trying to keep an eye on all of the hostages, make sure everyone stays safe, make sure everyone stays calm, keep them out of harm's way. And then she's able to completely let go against the capes that show up, the heroes that show up, and kind of like, well, I can't outwardly, defend myself at school, but I can do it here and I can let loose here. And that feeling of flipping the power dynamic of being like, well, I've been powerless at school and now I have power and I can use it and I can be vicious if I need to be, is like an interesting little flip that I see in her, and I love it. I love it.
So this is a great moving to the next section with the cops and robbers talk.
Yeah.
Because there's two dynamics that I love here. One is that it's all theatrical. Like at the end of the day, these are grown ass adults and
Mhm.
sometimes kids dressing up, having the things like a bank full of hostages be their like stage, going through the motions. And at the end of the day, like they go to jail knowing that they're going to break out again, with the whole 3-strike rule,
Right.
which, as always, great explanation for why everybody keeps breaking out of jail in like Batman's world. But the other part of it is in them doing this song and dance, the good guys and the bad guys are constantly song and dancing with each other.
Yes.
And it goes all the way back to when she was looking at the enforcers on the boardwalk. These aren't the cops, and like they're like hired thugs essentially for the boardwalk. That like, oh, if you're causing trouble on the boardwalk, these kind of pseudo criminal guys drag you out back and beat the shit out of you. You know?
It's really, it's very Vegas-y vibes. We're
Yes.
literally,
Mhm.
it's like, okay, if you have someone who wants to be a mass shooter and shoot up a casino in Vegas, the cops got to take you out because you're crazy. But if you're trying to like plan a heist or just rob a store or something, then the casino is going to take care of you because they're like, okay, you're gonna drive away business, and we
Yeah.
can't have that here. And I loved that whole, because to me it's just the tale as old as time, the bread and games, where it's like the people are distracted with superheroes fighting supervillains. So if you're just dressing up in your tights and just fighting each other, who cares? But it's
Yeah.
the real bad ones, that's what we have to focus on.
Yeah. They talk about that, right?
Yes,
Yeah, a
absolutely.
little
Okay.
bit. Yeah.
Well, and that heroes need villains to be heroes.
Yes.
There's
Exactly.
literally no other way for them to have that power over society, and especially because the protectorate is a government run thing, right? So
Mm.
in order to ensure that their capes have the most influence and power over society's perception of capes and like the protectorate, you need villains for them to fight and win against, which
Right.
later on is the reason why Miss Piggy that they called her, but Miss
Piggot.
Piggot, Piggo, okay. I think that's why she
That does
was
not sound nice.
so mad.
I think that's how it's
Yeah.
pronounced.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Well, and that gets into as well the different categories of people with superpowers that Lisa mentions. Where it's like, okay, you've got your regular run of the mill capes. That's 90% of people. But then you have your what do you call them? There's the people who go too far
S-class
or who
threats.
Yeah,
oh,
S class.
yeah, S-class threats, or the ones that she calls the real monsters who are barely even human anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she actually mentions a couple of them. I wanted to pull them up really quick. I don't have them right in front of me.
Well, like I don't know if it's here. They talk about somebody essentially looked, and I can't remember if it was the hero or the villain even, but they found out about somebody's at-home life, outside the mask, and they went to their house, and everybody's like, "That's an absolute no-no." And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, he got Robloxed. Like,
Right.
Yeah, just
Well,
where you cross
No
that
doxing
line.
allowed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
'cause
basically.
I think they even mentioned, which this is kind of foreshadowing just the type of story this is going to be, but like male superheroes like beating the female villains and then having their way with them. And they're just
Yeah.
like, okay, like that's a big no-no. We have to stop you.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. The list here, she says, if I can quote from it, the people who take it all too seriously are those who you wouldn't want to get on the wrong side of, like Lung, Oni Lee, Heartbreaker, Bitch. And then there are monsters, the really dangerous motherfuckers who are barely human anymore. The Slaughterhouse 9, Nilbog, the Endbringers.
Mm.
I think it's interesting that she mentions Bitch in the same category as Lung, in the term of, you know, the people who you really don't want to get on the wrong side of. And I think that's interesting because I don't feel like we've really seen, like, we see in the you know, the bank heist, we see what Bitch and her dogs can do, but they
Yeah.
don't. And while they are very vicious, are they comparable, for what we've seen, are they comparable to Lung? And like, from what we've seen so far, I would say probably not. But then again, if Lisa is putting Bitch and her dogs in the same category as Lung, I can't wait to see when Bitch like lets loose. You know?
Yeah.
Like
Well, I think Bitch is
can't
easily
wait.
worse than Lung, like, because she clearly has, we'll just call it autism for now, but like Lung probably even understands that, like, the whole having a gang is part of the song and dance. Like, oh, somebody lost territory, you gain territory, all that jazz. Bitch has no real social, like, understanding. She doesn't
Yeah.
understand social cues very clearly. She doesn't understand why people ask questions. Like, she doesn't understand that this is a song and dance. Like, to her, she's kind of getting pointed in a direction, and anybody that annoys her even is worthy of, like, they just need to die. Like, because that's the easiest thing, is just to kill them and get them out of the way.
Yeah, and don't forget, of course, that even though Taylor did, of course, significantly weaken Lung, Bitch's dogs did essentially pin him afterwards. And so, just in terms of power, too,
While he
she
was
probably,
flaming out too.
yeah. So she is quite strong.
Yeah. But yeah, I wouldn't even think of it of a strength perspective, just like they said, who takes it too seriously?
Yeah.
For Bitch, this is 100% serious.
Yes.
For
Yeah.
everybody else in the Undersiders, they do not, like, this is a job, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Put on
Yeah.
your
Doing it for
uniform, you go
money,
put in your hours, you clock out.
which I think also gives perspective on their individual responses to the idea of the bank heist. Because, like, Brian was very much like, why would we do that? Like, that's so risky. And, like, obviously, he's like, I do jobs to get money, not because I want to do this job, like,
Exactly.
Yeah.
specifically. Like, he's not, versus, like, I can't remember specifically, like, Bitch's reaction, but I feel like it's very much like, yeah, I'll do it. Like, of course I wanna do this thing, but Brian's like, "I don't think the risk is worth the reward,"
Mm.
and I think that is gonna continue, like, he's not a villain to
Yeah.
be a villain, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to go ahead and kick off this bank heist?
Oh,
Yeah.
Let's put the bugs in the van.
I was gonna
Let's
say,
get the bugs in the
I
van.
feel like
Oh,
we should
oh,
group some
oh.
chapters here, just so we can
Yeah,
talk
good
about
idea.
the heist as a whole. So we have
yeah.
the arrival at the bank, and sweeping through, taking hostages. Taylor puts a bug on each person so she can monitor them and know where they all are without necessarily having to have eyes on them. They start bagging up the money. There's a little bit of small talk with Bitch. And then whoopsie doo, the wards show up in much larger numbers than we had anticipated, with quite a large little group. Little 6 of them, I think, show up. We end up with an all-out attack with Taylor taking on Clock Blocker, some more fighting. Tattletale goes back into the bank. We have Kid wins insane cannon, and Taylor gets a fire extinguisher to the head. In which case, turns around. Oh, hey, look, it's Panacea and Glory Girl hanging out in the lobby. And we have a fun little interesting moment where with Taylor and her bugs and kind of getting a little bit of a headache and trying to figure out what's going on with her power. And a conversation with Tattletale and Panacea and Glory Girl, and kind of this a good little conversation there where Tattletale plays some mind games with ending it as the Undersiders retreat into the rain.
All right, so I'll go with the prep phase first. So as far as prepping goes, I thought it was because I was wondering, I was like, where is Taylor and how is Taylor going to get as many bugs as she can to the scene? Beautifully descriptor there, just and literally the image of a van full of bugs is terrifying.
So scary.
A Penske moving van full of bugs. And then the other full of monster dogs. They roll up to this packing heat.
And the image of Bitch basically having to transform these dogs slowly, like just basically like molding them and crafting them into these beasties just slowly so she doesn't burn out. I thought that was a great just little descriptor addition.
Yeah, I love that. We kind of get more of an insight into Bitch, how she uses her powers a little bit there, which is great. Because, I mean, clearly, it's not instantaneous. She can't just like poof and there's a giant monster dog.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then I know that this really got to me, but I always wondered for gated communities and different areas like that, just, well, what happens when an ambulance needs to show up? And I learned when I started working at a hospital, you know, ambulances have certain transceivers to where it's just a universal code that will open up gates for like those gated communities. And they very much so talked about that, where it's like, oh yeah, you know, SWAT teams and superheroes, we just give them codes to buildings, that way they can just get in. And they immediately exploit it. And I'm like, okay, well,
I love it.
that was
again those little details that's just kind of thrown in, like, oh hey, you know, just in case you hadn't thought about this, while putting it out there. I love it.
Exactly, just craziness.
Yeah.
But the fighting.
Oh my gosh.
Holy cow. Y'all told me it was great, but I was not prepared for just how great. I had never thought about having telekinesis used within like an inch of a person, but then being able to personify strikes. I mean, holy cow. That was just the biggest thing that stuck out to me. I mean, what for y'all, what was when you read this for the first time, if you can remember, like what got you excited as far as the fighting goes?
For me, it's one word, and it's the same word I use to describe good fight scenes visually as well in films and television, and that's weight. Like when you can feel the impacts and effects. So the example I use in reading this chapter is when Bitch jumps at Aegis for the first time, wraps him in the dog's tail, and slams him into the ground. The way Wildbow writes that, you feel your bones breaking as he's describing the impact, and he carries it throughout the rest of the fight. Just the weight of every throw, every punch, every hit, every bite, every sting, everything like that is just so visual.
Oh my god!
It sells the scene for me.
The bugs and clock blocker.
Oh my gosh!
All right, we're gonna intro the podcast within a podcast. Welcome to What the Fuck, Taylor.
Yeah,
shoving just as many bugs down Clock Blocker's throat as
and
possible,
up his nose and in
and
his
up
ears,
his nose and in just any hole
that
can
poor
find.
In his
that poor
freaking
kid.
eyes! Oh
Any
my
hole.
god!
Oh,
You know what
man.
they say? A hole's a hole, and
Rose
Taylor
does-
will find it.
Oh my god!
and she'll put a bug in it.
Yeah, she'll put a bug right up in it, and it gets worse because his power, as he's like randomly freezing bugs in place,
they're frozen in his throat.
some of them are frozen in him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Taylor says it so nonchalantly, but like, oh well, let's hope he doesn't vomit because he'll choke on his vomit. Like, I'm sorry, what? Taylor.
Yeah,
Taylor.
That was so
gross.
Up, and I was like, oh my god, that scene had my skin crawling. It had me. I don't ever want to see a bug ever again, and I didn't even have to see a bug.
Oh, get ready, we're only in Arc 3, baby.
Yeah, get ready for your main character right now to be nothing but bugs.
I mean, obviously, but that I was not ready for the eyes, the nose, ears.
It makes sense though, because her power is against certain characters, it really is essentially useless. Like against characters like Aegis, she knows, okay, that's a losing matchup. And even against Clockblocker, like for a while, he was fine. Like he was just the only reason he got tripped up was because he was trying to help Aegis and he got distracted. And
And also
that gave
because
her
he's
an
a
opening.
goofy motherfucker.
And also because he's a yes, because he's a
It
goob.
describes him so well. I love him, and that this just intro, even how he gets beat, he runs into one of his own frozen bugs in the
I
air.
love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Like,
That is
like
fun.
of course you're not going to
Clotheslines
see it.
himself on a bug.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
knocks himself out with his own
I do
power.
love that.
Like, which just goes to show what kind of a goober he is.
Which
But I
I
also
will say
loved-
though. Oh, go ahead, Taylor.
No, the only thing I was going to say, I also loved it was two jocks just trying to be smart, and they're like, "What if I wore your costume and you wear mine?" And then literally, since Clockblocker
That's what I
wasn't
was
in his
about to say.
costume, he fucking got attacked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
Oh.
honestly though, it would have worked. The only reason they
Yeah.
look dumb is because the Undersiders have Tattletale, and that's
Yep.
Yes.
legitimately the only reason.
Such a good ace up the sleeve.
Yeah.
Oh, I love
Absolutely.
it.
Mm-hmm. And I will say though that I had my suspicions whenever they were talking about Aegis just earlier on in the chapter. They're like, "Oh, Aegis has the Alexandria package, but he's actually not invincible. He just heals really well, and he can just damage himself and then like recover." And I had my suspicion, and I was like, "That sounds terrible." And then throughout the fight, and then especially in the interlude, it's like,
Mhm.
okay, this guy punches you, just shatters his wrist, and he's got a floppy arm, and then he just keeps hitting you with it. And I'm like, this poor dude.
So gross. Just wet noodle slapping you all
But
over the place.
It sounds like
Ugh.
though. It
Gross.
sounds like he must have some kind of mental pain blocker or something.
He's gotta
with his
have it.
I
powers
pray to
too,
God he
because-
does.
Yeah.
Because
because I
but-
mean, I think
Oh.
that's part of the point though. Is like if he would, because he has those built-in redundancies. I think the theory would probably be if he would feel pain, his body just says you're not going to feel pain.
Yeah.
And that's like part of the package of his powers, which is so crazy. And you see him in this fight, and it's like that
Ugh.
weight, like Jacob said, where Bitch's dog throws him to the ground, and then he gets up immediately. You're like, what?
Barely
the hell?
blinks.
yeah,
Yeah.
like
Just-
hopefully,
What the
I mean,
hell?
I know that Panacea like basically deals with the healing for most of them, but I hope that they have good health insurance because between Gru just knocking the fuck out of Vista and then Taylor knocking the fuck out of Panacea and then Aegis getting knocked out. I mean, these are just like NFL players getting CTE left and right.
Although even then at the end, Taylor was describing how they had to hide from Aegis because he was probably flying around still looking for them.
Like a floppy little noodly arm guy because he's all broken.
Like a limp doll just flying through
He's
the
like
air.
He's like a windsock.
You know what it is?
No.
You know,
Massive holes out of his body that he could stick his whole arm
Yeah.
you know
through.
what it is?
Ugh.
He is SpongeBob. That's what it is.
No.
Oh my god.
Oh my
You just
god.
squish him and cut him and slice him up, and he doesn't care.
Yeah.
That's
But
actually-
go ahead.
Yeah.
Alan.
I was gonna say that it's interesting you bring that up, Taylor, about the talking about he has the Alexandria package. He's invincible, but not actually. And I think that's a great foreshadowing to, oh, look, here's Glory Girl. She also has the Alexandria package. And same way, she's not actually invincible. And for all intents and purposes, they are all super strong, like Superman type flyers, but they all do it different ways.
Yeah,
Mm,
that is
Like
cool.
nobody has technically the exact same power.
yeah.
And speaking of Glory Girl, how about her confrontation with
Oof.
Taylor and Tattletale?
Ooh lordy. Ooh lordy.
Tattletale almost has as big of balls of steel
Yeah,
as freaking
Big
Wild
dick
Bow.
swinging. Big dick
I know,
swinging.
just like Wild Bow. Wild Bow is S tier dick, and freaking Tattletale is like AA plus.
Let's go. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I love that. I love that she says it like, don't call me stupid. Because by calling Tattletale stupid, you are so vastly underestimating her and her abilities, and just her kind of little glance and like, and breaks down walls. Like I love it so much. I think because I know we've talked about this in previous episodes, like favorite cape of the episode, but Tattletale, just freaking crushed it. I love it. I love it.
I loved her. I loved her jab when she's like, "Oh yeah, so my power is I'm psychic," and Glory Girl's like, "Nah, that's not possible." She's like, "Bitch, you're invincible and can fly. What are you talking about? Like, look around." What do you?
I also love
What do you
when
think?
like, oh, did mommy help you get into parahuman college? Like,
Oh man, just needling all of the weaknesses. I just love it. I love it.
Love their rivalry. It's so great.
So
And it starts
good.
off,
So
she walks in, she's like, "Oh, hey, Glory Hole." Like right away.
It's
Such
this
a
epitome.
good nickname.
It's the epitome of this brains versus bronze matchup that we
Yeah.
see everywhere.
Yes.
But it's so clever.
And there's
It's so
an
great,
interesting.
too.
Oh, go ahead, Alan.
Well, I was gonna say it's also really, really great because in the brains versus brawn matchup, Tattletale is so smart that she's playing these chess moves, and every now and then she kind of forgets that Glory Girl's just gonna throw Taylor at her,
Yeah.
like just wipe the chessboard and just bludgeon her. And it's like, is that the smartest option? No. But sometimes, like Lisa forgets that, like, oh yeah, sometimes dumb people don't do rational things, and Glory Girl could just beat you to death. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's what's interesting about that too is I feel like you find out importantly that Panacea wasn't actually manipulating Taylor, but was manipulating her spiders.
Yes.
Which is
Oh my
really
gosh.
interesting that Panacea, she obviously doesn't have the same powers that Taylor has, but clearly her powers extend to other life forms, which is really interesting.
Yes.
And on top of that, you kind of have, I feel like you have brain and brain versus brain and brawn. And because you have Taylor, who's pretty smart. She seems pretty smart throughout the series, I'd say. Panacea is obviously very clever. Tattletale is like double smart. And then you have Glory Girl.
The semi truck.
Who's like, yeah, the semi truck that you
much
hope
it.
you can get out of the way of. But I love the subtle way that Tattletale is helping Taylor while they're talking too.
Yes.
Yes,
Just
the
the
laser
like,
pointer.
the laser
Yes,
pointer
so
pointing it at
good.
the bugs so that she could kill them. And yeah, it's just like, oh, that was brilliant.
And just
Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead,
no,
Taylor.
no. I was just about to say, just the fact that you have that level, because usually you'll have like a moral dilemma where it's like, oh, since I'm this smart, I know the pain that I'll inflict. I know this, so I can't ever stoop down to the brawn. And then she's just like, oh, her force field. Oh, okay, and then shoots her.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ooh,
Yep.
I was
that
like,
gunshot.
she is about to be a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
And this is gonna, not to get ahead of our sections here, but I'll bring this back up when we get into favorite superpowers, because the Taylor firing the gun for me, and I was like reminding myself as I'm rereading this, one of my favorite Taylor moments of the whole series, because it's so perfectly encapsulates the power that Tattletale's ability gives her, and just being able to see the subtleties and weaknesses in people. That gunshot comes out of nowhere. Like, nobody sees it coming. And I read that, and I remember reading it for the first time and going, did she just kill her? Like, is Glory Girl dead? And then, of course, she's not. But like, oh, it's such a good moment.
Yeah.
Tattletale
Yeah.
is favorite character.
Yeah. Moving on to another section of the fight. I love I kind of like Kid Win. I don't think he's not my favorite hero from the arc, but I love he's just like, she turns around and he's like, yeah, Kid Win is summoning a huge fucking cannon.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Kid Win to me is like Green Lantern from all the new 52 DC films, where he's just there and has so much power and could do so much, but he has absolutely no idea how to handle any of it. It's like he's just back there summoning giant weapons. Yeah.
Just gets wrecked by Regent. What a great Regent just calmly walking towards him and just like flicking him off his skateboard, making him drop the gun and then stabbing him with the taser. It's like, yeah, sounds about right.
And if that's the case, I'll just go ahead and just talk about him in the interlude right quick, just to keep it flowing. But literally, just they're like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, there's big bad enemies. Like, what is it, Threat S, or what do we say, Threat O?
S rank.
Yeah, like there. He's like, yeah, I just came up with a giant weapon to like fight S class enemies, and then do we say it's Piggot? Like
Piggot.
Piggot or Director Piggot is like, oh, like, well, I'm going to need to see that power source so I can totally study it. Because it's just like, wait, you just made that? And he's like, yeah, big cannon go boom. And they're like, okay, sir. And just the fact that the government, so much bureaucracy, no matter what galaxy you're from, literally they're just like, yeah, we're going to need to see that and inventory this cannon to make sure it works. And he's like, well, it totally did. Against us, and then it did. We just showed.
I was about to say, because he was about to blast the hell out of every one of those hostages by accident if they hadn't stopped him.
Well, and you notice, and they end up using it against the team too, because that's what they get to hold Aegis down. As Regent just kind of locks it in place, firing on Aegis repeatedly to keep him down for a bit.
Right.
Yep.
But no, so I looked up the name so we pronounce it correctly. Apparently, it's pronounced Piggot.
Piggot.
Really?
Piggot. Okay.
Is how it's usually pronounced. Anyways,
all right.
But yeah, that whole like, and again, that's that little subtle world building where they come back and she's like, "Did you register that weapon? Did you have it go through the proper checks? Are you sure you didn't just kill a bunch of people because you wanted to play with your toys?" Like that. Which again is a subtle world building where it's like, oh, the heroes actually have to go through review processes for their equipment. They can't just make whatever they want and go to town.
Yeah, they are held accountable. And like we see it in the interlude in after arc 2 with kind of Victoria and Amy and talking about how like, well, the I can't remember, what group are they?
New Wave.
They're New Wave.
Yeah. Kind of like, well, New Wave is under a different category, under different, management as it were, but the wards, like, they have to follow the proper process, the procedures. And they have, tourists coming through and that they have to put on their masks and smile and wave in their dorms for, and it's like they, as much as they are like, yes, we're the young heroes of the future, but like they're also under a microscope so that they stay the heroes, that they don't, take little cheats here and there and here and there, and then ultimately, become a corrupted power. Like from this little, view we see into their world, it's like they have to have these things set up because they're still kids. They're still underage children with crazy powers.
Can we talk about how, since we've moved into the interlude, like all of the damage was done by the heroes?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
I feel like that was an important detail because, like, yes, obviously we have the ones that were robbing the bank, but the ones that did damage to, like, as a
street and the
whole,
buildings and the
like a society,
Yeah.
was the heroes, not the villains in the situation.
I mean, the innocents were just trying to rob a bank.
Yeah.
They're just like, let me rob the bank and no one gets hurt. And they meant it.
Yeah.
This is literally the example of like why like Walmart security doesn't chase you out when you shoplift. It's like, because you really are going to do more damage by trying to stop them than if
They're
just letting them
also-
go with whatever they
Retail
stole.
stores are also insured for a certain amount of,
And I'm sure
value.
this bank was insured.
I think
but,
they even
It
say
was.
that. I think they say
Yeah,
that
it is.
in the they talk about how the insurance
in the plans.
yeah.
In the
just-
plans
when
for
they're
talking
planning.
about it.
Print more money.
Yeah.
You know what? That's actually a really good point.
Exactly.
That is not. But yeah, but what you said, Kat, that is true. How it's this interesting contrast between how the Undersiders are so careful about their plans. Taylor is so careful about making sure that everybody's safe, no innocents get hurt. And then the heroes come in and they're just reckless. They invite a glory girl without telling their squad team. They use unauthorized weapons. They're throwing tables and buildings and smashing streets together with Vista's power. Like, they're just so, I think you're right. Like, it is an interesting point that they come across very disorganized and very chaotic.
Yeah.
And obviously, of course, these are the wards. They're the teenage heroes. You would hope that the Protectorate, the professional heroes, they wouldn't behave like this. But you get the sense that the heroes are definitely not as careful as they should be for heroes.
Yeah.
And can we just quickly mention my favorite favorite line of the interlude? Gallant's subtle, just put it on my tab, director.
Oh my
Right.
god.
Oh man.
I've got
Rich
this one,
people, am I
guys.
right? Gosh.
And then she's like, actually, no, I'm not. We're not doing that.
I love
Yeah.
that though, because it's her recognition of like, look, you can't just buy your way out of this. Like, there
Yeah.
are going to be consequences and there are going to be financial consequences. You are a fucking team. So you're going to pay the price like a fucking team, which I love.
Yeah.
I just love it.
Mm-hmm.
I do like too. The conversation between Gallant and Panacea is really interesting too. About Panacea, I don't know. It's an interesting side of a superhero you don't really see because, yeah, most of the heroes that we read about, they're the ones with the big powers. You know, they've got the super strength or the super speed, and they rescue the people. But Panacea's power is a lot simpler than that. She can just heal people. That means that she feels this immense pressure that other
Yes.
heroes don't really feel because there's not always a car to be stopped or a bank robbery to be stopped, but there's always sick people.
And I felt so bad. She literally said, I could spend 20 hours a day healing people in a hospital and millions and billions will still die.
Yeah.
Like that. And I just felt so bad for her. And it's just crazy. I love that he did the deep dive into like, yeah, I was healing this boy and he was sleeping soundly. And I was so jealous. Like, I was like, why can't I do that?
Yeah.
And it just makes you just feel, I think she's going to play a huge part of this story just because, wow.
And the juxtaposition between her and her sister,
Yes.
Yeah.
since Glory Girl is just a walking, like, destruction
Bulldozer, yeah.
bulldozer. She's just a wrecking ball in her like if she wants to do something, she'll do it, but she'll probably do it a little too hard. And versus Panacea is over here like, I am trying to help everyone I can, and it is never ever going to be even a little bit close to enough because her power is an extreme like help to society that she just doesn't feel like she can get to, like she can help with.
Mhm.
And Glory Girl's just like, oh man, I almost killed another one. Can you please come fix them real quick
Yeah.
so that I
Yeah.
don't get in
Right.
trouble?
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
And the mystery of who her dad is too is such an interesting thing that I forgot about.
Yes.
Of that, like realizing that
interested.
she's not really related and all that stuff. Yeah.
I'm interested to learn who her villain daddy is. Because
Yeah.
Who's your daddy?
sure.
Who's your daddy?
who your daddy be?
Mhm.
Well, are we at that
And
time?
I
Any other
can't
final
remember.
thoughts,
Well,
or should we
well,
move?
there's
into-
one more thing.
Oh, okay.
They
Oh.
finally named her.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah,
what are
good
our
point, good
thoughts
point.
on the name Skitter?
I was pissed.
What do you think, Taylor?
I was mad. I was like, oh, Skitter. I was like, oh man, we could have definitely come up. But I absolutely love that scene because he's like, well, what about Van Halen? And they're like, oh, there's already a rock band named that. And he's like, well, what about ZZ Top? Oh, well, there's a country band that he's like, damn it. And literally just having to like cycle through all of the index to find a new name.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like the idea that they probably were also thinking like Venom, but they were like, oh no, that's that Marvel villain. Like that exists in
Yeah.
the world.
Yes.
Eartha
Yeah, he's
Left
not-
already has that actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
When I like too that they even think about how the name will be taken by the public. So like, what if we just call
Yes.
her Maggot? Because they're like,
or
no,
Worm.
it looks
Yeah,
it looks
we-
bad if we lost to a girl
Maggot.
named Maggot.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
And
their
it's
name
interesting,
choice was
too-
highly. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say it's interesting too that a couple of them think that she's a guy at first.
But
Oh.
Clock Blocker corrects them because he knows.
He knows. He knows.
No,
No, guys, it was a chick. I totally know.
I wouldn't have lost to a dude.
She attacked me first. She totally kicked my ass.
A dude wouldn't have kicked my ass. It was totally a chick. What were you saying, Kat?
Oh yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
I was just trying to say that I just really liked that they're like there's absolutely no way that we can have a stupid name person beating us. Like we completely like we sucked. We did terrible, but there's just absolutely no way that we cannot give her a bad name, because if we're gonna lose, they need to sound badass, which I guess
Need to sound scary.
to them, Skitter is badass.
Well, I don't know if it's badass. It's mundane. It's neither good nor bad.
Yeah. I was gonna say, Kat, I really do want to know your thoughts on Skitter as a name or as a placeholder name.
It's unique.
Alrighty then.
That's what people say to parents of kids when the name isn't good.
Wow,
I guess
that's unique.
That's your kid's name? Oh, that's unique.
I just feel like there were a lot of options, bug related options, and they got there quick. But I'm curious to see how Taylor, our main character Taylor, what she thinks about it when it comes out
Right.
in like
Yeah.
the newspaper, whenever we get that scene of the newspaper spinning really fast and we see the headline.
I love it.
Inevitably.
She's like,
I
they
love
called
it.
me what?
Yeah.
Yeah. Real quick, I just want to throw in again just weird powers that we don't know fully what they do. But Miss Militia, we meet her, and she just like is randomly cycling weapons. It's like I don't remember more details about her honestly from the story. So to me, I'm just like, is her power just like cycling through the Call of Duty gun menu? Like what is
Yeah,
happening?
she's playing gun game all the time.
Exactly.
Should we do favorite superpowers or favorite capes from the arc?
Yeah. I think
do
we're at
do
that
favorite
point.
capes, and we'll end with Kat and I with our predictions.
I like it.
Oh yeah. I as always love Glory Girl. As the discover of her power, kind of. It's so interesting and unique, and yeah, I just really like her and the power all the time.
All right.
I already said it, but Tattletale is just big dick swinging this arc. Just absolutely. And I love seeing her thought process like in action like that with their conversation in the bank. Just it's so good. And she's toying with them the whole time. And I love it. I eat it right up.
Yeah, I'll echo Hannah. Tattletale was the standout for me this arc.
Yeah. I always kind of gravitate towards the really weird or unique powers, and I think Vista is the one that stands out for me this one. Just because it's one of those powers where kind of like Taylor's at first you're like, okay, you can stretch your shrink space, sure, fine. But then when it's applied by the right person, and obviously Vista is in a way kind of a reflection of Taylor because she's 13, she's young, she has no idea what she's doing. She's an actual kid in these super dangerous situations, which is terrifying to me. Um, but just this idea of what can you do by manipulating space? It's such an interesting idea to think through the available abilities that she would have as a superhero going forward. And I don't remember how much it gets explored with her or if she comes back up much, but just that idea I thought was really interesting as a superpower.
I guess for me, because he didn't get talked about a lot, but Browbeat,
Browbeat.
just because he wasn't explained a lot, but just the fact that telekinesis was used in that way to where it's like, oh, like he's this giant, just muscular dude, but then in reality he's SpongeBob with the arms that just really quick, like right before the fight. That just was awesome. And because then he literally like like shrinks back down afterwards, where he's like, yeah. But and then for my prediction side of it, obviously when I brought up did 9/11 happen, that's gonna be a reoccurring thing every week. But this just leads straight into it with director Piggot had a line where she's like, y'all are not going to undo all that I've built. And immediately, anytime any government employee or anything is like, you're not going to undo what my prediction. This is going to be a story to where it's okay. We have to undo the status quo because there's actually like the big bankroller behind the scenes is actually some protectorate guy that's paying villains to make sure that heroes can fight. That like it's going to be that whole like big smorgasbord thing. So I think that the big boss behind the scenes is definitely Mr. G. from the school.
Mr. Gladly?
That's
it's
a great villain name.
definitely Mr. G pulling the strings, but
Extremely sinister name.
yeah, because
I
he's
like
like,
it.
if I can just
Gladly.
keep my students occupied, then maybe they won't be bullying everybody. But that's what I got.
I think my favorite superpower was actually Clock Blocker. I hate his name. I think he himself is still a little goofy and like needs some work, but I think
Yeah.
that the power is really interesting. Instead of calling it just like freezing the way that like you would see it normally where they would just be like, oh, they're freezing them. But to think it's like a time, like this person that thing is frozen in time. I just thought that was really interesting and how it becomes like a hard force that you absolutely cannot get through until the power wears off. So
Yeah.
that was my favorite superpower to learn about this arc.
He's definitely my second favorite power.
Predictions. I think Professor Haywire is going to come up because I don't, if you discover an alternate Earth, there's no way that that's the only thing you did. So I'm interested to see get some more information on who Professor Haywire is and how much his
he's a one-hit
science
wonder.
comes into. But that's lame. I want to see how I think Taylor is going to be resistant to her name at first. I don't think she's going to be like, "Oh, yep, that's good. I'll take it." Like I think she's going to be like, "No, I don't want that." And then it's just going to stick to where she can't avoid it any longer. Um and I'm continuing on my strong feelings that as we continue going forward, she's going to get more and more into the Undersiders. I don't think that she's coming back from this bank heist thinking that she's still going to be able to be a superhero. I think that with after that conversation with Arms Master, like she's not quite seeing the good guys as always good. So, yeah.
And Jacob, if you don't mind, right before you say your ending thing, and we can completely delete this audio of mine if y'all disagree. But I thought a hilarious homework would be at the very beginning of next episode, we all take one show, movie, piece of media, and what is the funniest way that Earth Adolf like changed it?
Oh my god.
Yeah, Earth Adolf is wild.
Yeah.
Wait, hang on.
Eartha left?
Adolf.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys. Eartha left. Like,
God.
what is one thing that you think would be hilarious that Eartha left would do differently?
Okay, well, we're
Well, I'll tell
definitely
you,
keeping this now.
on Earth Adolf,
heck
the
yeah.
Empire would definitely have won in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
The
yeah.
Empire would have definitely won in real life. Das Kinder.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if there's no other final thoughts here, we'll go ahead and conclude this episode where we discussed Arc 3. Thanks for everybody for contributing, and thanks to everyone else who listened. It's been a lot of fun. We're definitely going to keep it going. Next episode will be Arc 4. So same theme, same process we've had going here. Arc 4 plus the interlude. We're going to discuss that on the next episode. And stay tuned for part 2 of this episode where Alan and I break down Arc 3 and talk about adaptions and what a screenplay would look like for this portion, and maybe or maybe not how many episodes this would take. It's going to be a lot of fun. And thanks again for listening. Michael, if you want to play us out. All right.
Bring it into part 2.
Let's go. All right. Well, here we are once again, myself, Jacob, and Alan, back to break down Arc 3 of Worm, approaching it from a adaption perspective, adapting it to visual media, television, film, etc., and kind of how we would go about restructuring and sort of reorganizing the story uh, into something a bit different.
I know that we talked about cold opens.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I want to jump right into this.
Yeah.
I like the cold open for this, but let me tell you that I also love a like an opening credits sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And Taylor going on a jog,
Mm-hmm.
because it happens so often, is the perfect time to be putting uh just the title or the credits over it while she's
Yep.
jogging around the city. Also a great opportunity to show the city as it progresses.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. Yeah. No, you
And,
definitely could.
but
Oh, sorry. Go
also,
ahead.
if we were gonna do our like title sequence,
Mm-hmm.
the like one that's just, every time at the beginning, I think running around the city, the different parts, literally like having, the different gangs and stuff as she goes by the different areas of town. And of course, at the end, she ends up on the pier looking over the water. There's a bright flash of light and her silhouette, with the protectorate headquarters off to the left.
Right.
And then all black with the white letters worm.
Yeah. Yeah. I do like that. No, I love the imagery of her running. I think it's because it comes back a lot. It's sort of it's very definitive for her character. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
And you don't have to do it every time, just every time you don't have one of those good cold opens with just the worm on the screen.
Yeah, no, I agree. The other thing too is that because the way this interlude sort of picks up right at the end of the arc, you could you could only ever do it as a cold open two ways. Either one, it's like a sort of ominous 3 days later, and then after the cold open we do like a 3 days prior, that kind of thing, and we don't really fill in the details. Or
Yeah.
two, and this might just be the better bet, although I can't remember because I haven't read the next arc yet. I haven't reread it. And I can't remember what that interlude is, but this could just be the cold open for the next episode after the bank heist, is that you just open on the wards for episode 4, and the cold open is their reaction to the previous episode.
Yeah.
You know,
I'll even say that I think this might be the first episode that we potentially have to split in two.
you know what? I didn't. I was thinking it. I didn't quite write that down, but I was thinking. I was going as I was looking over this. I was like, man, this is gonna be a long episode. There's a lot here. This goes on for a little
I
while.
don't usually do it, but I'm gonna pull out my pen right now.
Okay.
Pulling out my pen, I'm going to my notebook,
Yep.
and I'm gonna say it's after the beating with Armsmaster.
Okay. Okay. All right. Interesting. So everything. Oh man, I wish I had some better notes because everything before Armsmaster is all it's like all the it's the breakdown in the
Bank.
loft, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, starts with the jog, goes to
Yep.
school,
Yep.
all the stuff in the loft.
Yep. Okay. So then and then leave. Yeah. Then after Armsmaster, that could work. That could work. That could absolutely work. And then just have the entire heist as the next episode.
Yeah, because there's two options. There's one is to finish it with Armsmaster with on that tension,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
or you finish it on uh the taking hostages, and it's Taylor's idea.
Yeah.
Because
I'm a little more inclined for that route simply because aside from episodes 1, the fight with Lung, episode 2 is pretty character driven. There's not a lot of action, not a lot of movement. It's a lot of character development and introductions. So if you do more of that in episode 3, pacing wise, it's probably gonna be pretty slow. So it might be a good idea to get into the heist a bit just to sort of kind of ramp that up
Yeah.
and then cut there. I like it though. Yeah, this could easily be 2 episodes.
So I was just thinking about like that's a perfect place after having the meeting with Arms Master, and for her essentially to give him the middle finger by not only aiding and abetting but contributing.
Mm-hmm.
Good idea on making this even more evil.
Yeah, yeah. All right, let's operate for the sake of framing some of this. We'll go ahead. We'll kind of frame it for one episode since it's one arc. But I
Yeah.
definitely like the idea of splitting this one up. If for nothing else, just to help build the tension.
Yeah.
And then in addition to that too, because another good reason to split it is because we get that introduction to the wards via Tattletale, via Lisa.
Mm.
Um, and so having that payoff really come in the following episode could work well, as opposed to just cramming it all into one episode.
Yeah, I guess you could do it with if you wanted to do it with the wards arriving larger. I think having like the super chaotic right out the back of them bagging money, getting into a fight with bitch already, and then the wards showing up and it being like, well, when they weren't supposed to show up till later. Also, there's way more of them than they're supposed to be.
Right.
We just kick off the the first half of the episode with the action. We go hog wild, and then you kind of slow it down with all the negotiation and finish it off pretty nicely, just walking out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing with these, and I think we're gonna have this flexibility with a lot of these arcs, is you can drag out or condense action scenes to fit whatever length you need, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, we need some more time. Oh, they just fight a little longer. Oh, we need to get to the ending. You end the fight a little sooner. There's so much room to work with. So
Yeah.
we can
Whether
absolutely.
or not you focus on a couple of characters fighting over here or over there versus like they're just in the background while two people or your main girl is fighting.
Oh, I mean, a perfect example is in this arc, right? So during kind of the big showdown between with Lisa and Taylor versus Glory Girl and Panacea, kind of that whole scene. I mean, that takes up like a majority of those chapters. Meanwhile, the fight is still going on outside. So like you could easily cut back and forth, building tension, going over here, coming back. There's so many ways that you could play around with that whole scene. It can take forever if you wanted it to.
Oh yeah. Yeah, before I, start monopolizing stuff, is there anything you want to go over kicking off this arc?
Kicking not particularly. I got a few things that in order, because my big thing whenever I'm watching a show, especially any sort of fantasy or science fiction, something like that, where there's an extensive world that's ripe for exploration. When I'm watching that on television, I hate exposition. I hate rote exposition where a character is just sitting down and explaining the story. Nostalgia aside, perfect example, the Star Wars title crawls right at the beginning. Like, we love them now and nobody else does them because they're too iconic, and we love the way they make us feel when we see a new title crawl. But the fact that if you have to contain your story to a title crawl in order to get your audience up to speed, nowadays I think most people will consider that pretty lazy writing. Right? We see variations of that. Yeah.
You're 100% right. I have never liked the title crawl in Star Wars for that reason.
Yeah.
But I have always loved the title crawl for its like epic aesthetic.
Oh, 100%. Like, I mean, it sets the tone and everything. Yeah, I can't knock it. It's perfect. It's what makes Star Wars. I mean, it's a whole thing. And of course, yeah, if you've got a style and everything like that, then that's one thing.
Leans into that space opera.
Yeah, oh yeah, very much
And
so.
like having there's some books where it'll be like, the not the characters, there's another word for it. Like it'll essentially be like the cast in order of appearance, and I'm like, I'm reading a book, but okay. And it literally gives you everybody and their pronunciations like up front.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. More referring to, and you see this, you'll see this a lot of times today, where you're not getting a title crawl, but you will get like a few, like over a black screen, right? You'll get some text of narration. It's the year
Yeah.
2100, and mankind is on the brink of extinction. Yada yada yada. Like
My
you don't.
favorite opening to the Mech Warrior franchise is always, the year, it's the 23rd century, and mankind is once again at war. And that's all they have to say. It's
Yeah,
so good every time.
yeah, yeah. But all that to say, if we can avoid just spitting out exposition, then we need to, in terms of
Yeah.
and how it done. And I say that only because the scene, when reading this, the point where that popped in my head was when Lisa is running through the wards, running through the list of the wards, who's who, what their powers are, yada yada, and it goes on. It works really well when you're reading it as a book, but like if we're just sitting there listening to her say that, you're gonna lose the audience. Like there's not enough to keep an audience engaged just listing out characters and their powers. So we have to do something with that, whether it's you're cutting to the ward specifically, right? The character, and you're watching a quick scene of them displaying their powers, or if there's another way to do it. But that's the only thing initially.
I like that for like some comedic bits, but even then, the cutting to them and cutting back kind of irritates me a little.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. Yeah, you got to do it well if you're going to do it.
I think the, and I can't believe I'm saying this because I don't actually like it. I think the Guardians of the Galaxy exposition of going around in the circle, everybody makes their snide remark while we're talking about people. I think is a great, because they even do it later. Like the heroes even do it. The wards do it when they're talking about the villains. They literally have the same exact thing, but in reverse.
Yeah.
So in this case, like I think it works if we're back at the meeting room, we're going around the table, we're maybe bringing up some personal history about characters, but for the most part, like I do genuinely think that this is interesting enough that it makes it worthwhile to have it said, but for it to be done quickly and with witty dialogue.
And yeah, and maybe that really is just the solution, is just to shorten all of that to just one or two quips, right? Because you're right, we do want to hear about it, especially because specifically with the heist itself, we need to be aware of what Aegis and Clockblocker can do, because they switch uniforms, and we need to know why that's significant. So we need to know enough about who they are to understand the importance of that moment during the heist. So yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it is just as simple as just shortening that down to, like you said, a quick quip, a one-liner, something kind of witty, while they're prepping for the heist in other ways, something like that, just sort of getting Taylor up to speed.
Yeah, because I think given the amount of thinking that we are already going to be cutting out, which is a great deal, I think that this show is going to fluctuate wildly between good character moments, good dialogue back and forth, a lot of exposition as well, and then some just badass fights.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes those will be entire arcs. Like I don't think the explanation might take up a chapter, but fights will take up an entire arc.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
And character moments will take up, an entire chapter. So I don't think that we'll be crowding. You're going to be crowding with exposition up front. But I don't think it's unwarranted for people who are coming into this world.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more that we could be putting in, because we would be doing good editing. We're not going to. one example that I have written down or pretty early on is I would love to show off why Taylor specifically picked running.
Mm,
And we
yeah.
know from flashbacks that it's because uh, Emma, I think, sicked like a bunch of boys on her
Right.
and they ran after her and she outran them, but she got just winded immediately. And she was like, yeah, I'm not about to have that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so she started running.
Right.
But I don't think it would be prudent for us to show it even in a tiny flashback. I think it would be better. She like runs up and Brian hands her the coffee and goes, well, like, when did you start running? She's like, about the same time that, Emma started like telling the cross country team to like chase me down.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I do. I like that. I see. I see where you're going with that.
In fact, I think that's going to be a reoccurring theme.
Hmm.
Is there are a lot of thoughts in her head that I think we need other people to pull out of her.
Ooh, that's good. I like that. Because you're right. We do just naturally in changing the medium, we're going to lose a lot of that internal monologue just naturally. Yeah, that's good. I think that's pretty smart. And again, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like that's how you insert exposition without having to read it off of a flashcard, right?
Yeah.
You work it into the story, into the dialogue so that it flows, so that it feels really natural.
Which actually makes me think about something, that I'll have come to, in in the other section, but
Hmm.
I think Tattletale's power is literally exposition. Like
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and what she does kind of in and out of combat is just exposit.
Yep.
So you have to attach it to somebody who's really witty and interesting, who
Hmm.
makes the exposition fun. And Lisa does that pretty well.
Yep.
Like when she's talking about things with Taylor, not only is she informing her about stuff, but she's also like you can feel it's an active bonding experience with her.
Hmm.
Like she is telling you this because she's relating to you because she cares. Like that's what she's doing for Taylor. And then in other points, she's doing it because it's her job. There's like
Right.
she's
Right.
giving information across at all times. That's just who she is and her power. But also, she does it in different ways. And I
Right.
really like that because she is our main exposition for this chapter or for this arc.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's perfect. And like, there's some subtle rules to exposition that you can follow in order, because like sometimes there's no way around it. You have to put that into the script somewhere. So little things like as long as you're not like as long as two characters aren't talking and one character is explaining something to the other character that the other character would definitely know, right?
Mm,
Um,
mm.
like for example, if during that quick cold open with Glory Girl and Panacea, if Glory Girl was explaining to Panacea who their parents were, that wouldn't sound right. But they don't have that. She has a Glory Girl explaining to the criminal who their parents are,
Yeah.
right?
Do
So that
you know who the
exposition works.
fuck my mom is?
Yeah, exactly. And that works in that scenario because that's natural and that's how you would explain it, but you wouldn't have them explaining it to each other. So, and the nice thing about the setup we have with Taylor and the Undersiders is that Taylor is sort of the POV character for the audience in the sense that she is new to the world of capes. And so she can sort of be that sponge to absorb the exposition from Taylor, from Brian, whoever it may be, and it not feel terribly out of place to have things explained to her, and by extension, explained to the audience when necessary. So there's definitely places we can put that in, and Lisa definitely makes the most sense for that.
Yeah. Um, let's see. I like the continued mystery that we've got going on of the boss. I think that's
Yep.
something. There's a
Yep.
few things in here that obviously I'm not sitting behind the camera. I'm writing this out. But I think we need to emphasize like the mystery of the boss, kind of.
Yep.
Everybody wants to know, and I think continuing to play that up is pretty good. I have another note in here somewhere about maybe like playing up the name until this chapter
Mm-hmm.
is a pretty good.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Yeah, a few things like that, and it's funny. It feels like, and we kind of mentioned this briefly, maybe last episode or before, but Wildbow definitely wrote the story. It feels like he definitely wrote the story with some cinematic framing in mind. And maybe that's just the nature of the serialized format, just 2 chapters a week, sort of just getting through everything. But there's elements like that that just play really well and adapt really well for television, where, like you said, you have those subtle mysteries that audience can sort of speculate on week to week. um, the fact that we had the interlude with Glory Girl and Panacea previously, like last episode, and
I
then we
know,
see
right?
them this episode, like it's just such a perfect sort of introduction, and then and then seeing them in the next episode is perfect. Um, yeah, a lot of little things like that that are that make our job easier.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see. We gotta. I mean, because one of the exposition things is like everybody's gonna ask about how powers work.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just gonna be something in your head, and Wildbow has an answer for everything, and you've got
Mm-hmm.
to have him talk about the Manton effect. So,
Yep.
like, that's one of those things where, like, yeah, it's just raw exposition to talk about that, but like, you gotta talk about it.
Yep. And
Um,
that's an easy one to slip into a conversation with Taylor, because I shouldn't even. I think even in the story, right? She doesn't know what it is, or she's like, I'm not familiar. I'm not familiar with it to some extent.
yeah,
So yeah, really easy way to rope that in. Um, there's a lot of ways, because you're right. That's going to be necessary for people to understand.
yeah. I think cutting. There's a section after she talks to Arms Master, which I think is just going to be such an intense scene.
Oh, I can't wait. I'm speaking as if we're manifesting this into a show, because
I have a hard time on the daily not thinking that this is currently in production.
I know. I know. That's okay. That's why we're here. That's what we're doing. We're
That's why we're
willing
here.
it.
That's why
We're
we're here.
willing it into existence.
I'm
But no, I
manifesting it
agree.
right now.
That scene between Taylor and Ars Master, just because of how much of a contrast it is from their first
Not the word
conversation.
I thought you were about to say there.
How much of a contrast it is between their first conversation, just the build up, the starting to see glimpses of like who Arms Master really is. Oh, I can't wait. It's such a
Yeah.
good scene.
Yeah. I think this is also, we were talking about doing the little end credit scene with like the post credit scene with like the ripple in the water.
Yeah, little tease.
We got a little bit more tease of that now.
Mm-hmm.
Not
Yep.
gonna say too much more, but
Yep.
we get talked about. I like all that gets thrown up right away.
Oh
Is
yeah.
yeah. And the cops and robbers speech is another one of those, like, that's how the world works. These are we're still laying the foundation for
Mm-hmm.
how this world works.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the explanation is genuinely interesting enough to break, a lot of that show don't tell.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Because if you're watching this, you've seen superheroes done every which way under the sun.
Yep.
And the problem is, I'll say with the exception of the boys, most of them are done pretty much the same. And there are some oddities out there, but I'll be honest, they're not good enough to warrant even like they don't first off, I don't think they have good explanations. And two, like they're not that interesting or that deep in terms of like how their systems work to warrant an explanation.
I
I'm
agree.
thinking Umbrella Academy in particular in my head.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. Well, and it's one of those things too where like ever since really we had superhero films before the Marvel explosion, but in a post Marvel world, post Iron Man 1 world, right? Audiences are just so familiar with the superhero setting that you can just start a story in that setting and no one's really going to bat an eye. They're just going to go, they're just going to accept, oh, okay, this is a world of superheroes. That's fine.
Yeah.
Right. So if you can improve on that, right? If you can interject a little bit of that, little bit more, right? There's just something here that's just not quite right. Then now you've sort of roped people in beyond just the general appeal of the genre. And I think Worm absolutely has that. So it's all about subtly keeping that intrigue present throughout the story.
Yeah. 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 You know, it makes you think like you don't. Yeah. Yeah. I'll move on. Move on. Let's see, went a lot of explanation. So we talked about that. Kicking off the bank sequence that feels really good.
Mm-hmm.
Man,
I'm just
this
imagining.
is our first like
Go
we've
ahead.
had our essentially a 1v1 superhero showdowns.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've got the opening with Lung, and after that we have little interactions between people. We have but no full on like you know, super, you know, a cape versus cape battle. We haven't had that since the beginning.
Yep.
And this is a throwdown. Like what, 7v, honestly like 4?
Yeah. Kind of right about. It's a good fight. It's a drawn out.
I genuinely, and I'll say this, I genuinely forgot all those other people showed up at the thing. I
did
from
too.
what I remember, I remember the entirety of the Victoria Amy sequence because it's the most impactful.
Yeah.
Like the other people is just getting their asses kicked, you know?
I remembered that, and I remembered just I remembered the turn that bitch makes with her dogs to jump on Aegis. That's it. I was like,
Yeah.
I remembered that, and I remembered the confrontation. But no,
That's gonna
it
be,
was so much.
ooh, yeah. Yeah. It's just, you know, that whole sequences. Something I had here as an edit. So the bank sequence gets started, and right away they've got the two, essentially I'm imagining like the moving vans.
Yep.
And one of them is full of bugs.
Right.
And I would like to think that we have this entire driving sequence with Tattletale. That is like we could somehow subtly being showing like the bugs, maybe not obvious, but like maybe there's more bugs on the window shield than there should be while they're talking.
Right.
And then they show up and like Gru is like, I thought, you know, like I thought you were gonna be late. And you know, Tattletale's like, we're right on time. Like we let you know, yeah, he's like, yeah, but y'all left like an hour early. And you know, they're like, well, we needed to get, you know, needed to get everything. And they throw open the thing and you know, all the bugs are packed inside.
Yeah.
And he, you know, of course he goes, do you have enough? And she goes, like, this is after I like this is what like we drove around so I could pick the good ones.
Yeah.
Like this isn't even all of them.
Oh no, it's great. Like we get a taste of Taylor's power in the first episode, right? On the fight with Lung, but it's nighttime, and even if visually you throw a bunch of swarms out there, just in the nature of the setting, you're going to lose some of that impact, especially because Lung is such a presence in that scene. He's going to be
Yeah.
distracting. But like just that when she throws open the van and just this swarm comes oozing out under her command, marching
Yeah.
towards the bank, like it's gonna be such an image. Like it
Yeah.
just it looks so good.
Now, here's my question. Do you play with a little bit of fire and throw like a it makes no sense at the time them driving this van around, stopping randomly, having a turn to each other conversation, start the van back up, move again,
Oh, I see.
and they do this a couple times, and
Yeah.
you're just like, and it cuts to wide shots while they're talking of them
Yeah.
just like there.
Yeah.
And if you notice, but like maybe subtly in the background, you've got streams of bugs coming in,
Yeah.
but very subtle. And otherwise you're just like, this is some terrible CW show, choices.
Yeah.
And then, they hit you with the, oh, why were y'all so late? Oh, because we had to make a couple stops and pick up these bad boys, and throws the thing open and it's full of bugs,
Right. Right.
And
Oh,
then
there's
all of a
oh
sudden you're
yeah,
like,
that's good.
oh, it wasn't just terrible choices. It was they were
Intentional.
the creators were fucking with us.
I don't hate that. I don't hate that. I actually like that. You could absolutely get clever with how you do that. One thing tonally with the heist scene that I think is going to be interesting to play around with is especially just knowing where the story goes. There's no way you can avoid a a R or mature rating for the show, just in terms of visuals alone, what you see. And
Yeah.
it's hard because really in this type of genre, the only times we really see grotesque powers are comedic, right? With like Deadpool or The Boys,
Yeah.
or animated.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of I don't want to say serious because it's not really the right word, but there's not a lot of live action sort of body horror fantasy, really.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of it. So, like for example, Aegis's power, right, is gross. Like he could just get cut up, bruised. I mean, in the interlude, right? Like
Yeah.
him in the interlude, just like with half a jaw and just holes throughout his body is such a crazy image. But it it's funny in the sense that it's like absurd, but it's not a comedy, right? They're having real conversations and things like that. It's a tonally it's going to be really interesting. How do we approach that? You know, just visceral use of these powers without it crossing into just absurd humor.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's going to be some of these that are like you said, they're just so absurd that that's just going to be how they are. You're looking
Right.
at this guy, you're like, that's kind of gross, and it's and he's acting like nothing's wrong because that's his power.
Right.
Um, but then you're going to get to stuff later, and there's nothing funny about it.
Yeah.
Like, there's no comedic element. You know, uh, yeah.
Yep.
I think this is actually a good way to ease people into the like concept that gore and body horror is a part of this. I mean, every time I think about bitches dogs,
Hmm.
they kind of invoke Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde from
Oh yeah.
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen,
Ooh. Okay.
where
Yeah.
the skin is kind of getting so stretched it
Yeah.
becomes clear, and
Yeah.
it's the flesh is like ripping out because all the muscles underneath are bulging out, and it's very like all I can think of is like pink flesh,
Right.
if you know what I mean.
Yep. Yep.
Like all the skin is ripped off and all that stuff underneath, and that's what the dogs look like. It's that with like bone spikes.
Right.
Like they're disgusting.
Yeah. Oh no, they're
Like
gross.
Like that is what happens. They rip their skin off when they,
Yeah.
molt.
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. And maybe this would be a pretty good sort of introduction to the style of powers and combat that people are going to expect or should be expecting, especially as the arcs continue.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Um
that's beyond the writing. That's into storyboarding and
visuals.
yeah, meeting with some
I would genuinely be
cinematographers.
curious as to see somebody get around a lot of the more gory elements of this
Mm-hmm.
through some creative, director. This is
Mm-hmm.
another one of those like somebody who can really nail it by playing inside the boundaries,
Wes
and
Anderson.
using some creative talents to, to make you feel the same sort of uncomfortableness without actually showing it.
Yeah.
I think that would be interesting. This kind of marked for both, but I think really showing off the chaos of what's going on while we're in
Mm-hmm.
the bank. Um, and this is kind of going to overlap with what we talked about in part one, but um, you know, this is Taylor's moment. It's the moment
Mm-hmm.
of in most other movies or TV shows, the explosions going off, their ears are ringing, everybody's shouting like, "What do we do? What do we do?" And all of a sudden, whichever character steps up, and it's like, "You do this, you do that." You know, they come into their own, and this is Taylor's
Yep.
and just I think really emphasizing during this back section that like there is a rhythm that we hit when it comes to chaos, and it is Taylor's rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah,
No,
I
I
think it's
agree.
just
I agree. It's a big moment for her. Um, I mean, not just in terms of her character development, but just in terms of uh, how she handles herself in these fights. Because we're going to see this progression continue throughout the story, and it kind of starts here. Like you could make the argument it starts with Lung, but I mean, really, it starts here.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and this is
I mean, it
this is
starts with
her.
this arc even because
Yeah.
this is. I mean, we. I take it back. I take it back. It starts with bitch.
Okay. Fair. Fair.
I
Yep.
forgot. Okay, it does start there because she finally has the why the fuck should I not?
Yep.
And still, I did not
Right.
think I was going to enjoy that scene as much as I did, but keep coming back to it. Yeah, that, and then you have you go from there to the arms master
Yep.
conversation, and then all the way to now, where in
Yep.
the middle of it.
And this scene really is sort of the effect of that arms master conversation, or the
Yeah,
result, I should say. Um, I mean, it just builds into this scene so perfectly. Uh, this whole episode, I think, is going to be, like I said, we probably would split it up, but just thinking of this in terms of one episode, this would be the episode that I feel like people who are trying to convince their friends to watch the show would be like, "Oh, you guys got to watch it. It starts off good, but by episode 3, man, oh, you're just hooked." Like I feel like this is where the show would find its footing. Uh,
yeah. If I had to name this episode, which you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and like
we do need
I don't know.
names.
This needs to be our like the podcast within the podcast right here.
Hmm.
What's this episode name?
we do need names. I
Because
am
I have
terrible.
one that's stuck in my head right now, and it needs some workshopping.
Okay,
Is Morning Glory
Morning Glory. Okay.
something to do with? I think a combination of like this is the dawn of Taylor's character.
Hmm.
This is the start of it, and the fact that Glory Girl shows up. I think those are two
It's kind of
really
poetic.
good. It's very
Yeah.
poetic because this is also the start of
Yep.
other things to all kind of come out of this
Yep.
episode.
Yep.
Um, this
That's
is
not
we
bad.
this is where it all kind of kicks off. So like, Morning
like it.
Glory, Dawn, Agitation's fine, but I'll be honest, these are very nebulous names for arcs. Um,
Yeah. I love Wildbow's theme that he carries throughout the whole serial. It's a lot of fun when kind of going back, but I'll be honest, I can remember the name of the last arc of the book and like the first, and that's it.
I can say some weird words, and I am sure that a couple of them are the names of,
Yeah.
arcs here.
And truthfully, episode names aren't terribly important. Like I don't think there's a lot of good television where every episode is titled, and I couldn't tell you the name of those episodes individually.
Yeah, that is true.
But on the flip side of that, there's a lot of good episodes that I can name individually. The episode "The Fly" from Breaking Bad is probably my favorite episode, and I just know it's called "The Fly." If I want to go back and watch an episode of Breaking Bad, I'm going to watch "The Fly." Like so, there's definitely something to be said for a well named episode as well. So
That's
definitely
true.
worth the effort to think of something
Yeah.
good.
I mean, yeah, other than I think that maybe on a rewrite, if we're slightly straying off from the path, I think that maybe we put a little bit more emphasis on Clock Blocker.
Yeah.
Because him as a character gets shown off even before he talks. Kind of during this fight, it really shows off who he is, which is goofy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that he has a lot of personality. His name's Clock Blocker.
I know. Yeah.
Like
right.
that right there should tell you, who he
Great name.
is.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think that like he, while there's so many other people that are important, I think that he doesn't get enough attention in Worm, and maybe that's just because I'm a fan, you know.
Everyone's gonna say that about their favorite character.
Everybody's gonna say that about a favorite character, but I think he needs a little bit of plumping,
Yeah. Well, and especially because as we go on to, like we mentioned before at the very beginning, we're gonna be cutting arcs. We're gonna be condensing stories. There's like 600 named characters in Worm. We're not naming all of those characters in the show. There will be times when characters will absorb dialogue that belongs to a one-off character from an arc that we don't need to include for a TV series that we could give to the clock blockers and those characters to sort of give a little more life to some of these characters. That I agree. I don't think clock blocker gets enough attention. The wards in general, I think, are fairly underrepresented for the most part, with the exception of a couple of them. And that continues with some other characters as well. So I'm fine with that. Let's give Clock Blocker a little bit more to do, a little bit more to say.
Yeah. All right. Well, do you have any other things? Otherwise, I would love to try and name these episodes if you want to try and do that.
Yeah, I think I'm about wrapped up for this episode. I think just maybe the last thing would just be, we mentioned at the very beginning. I like your idea of maybe starting this episode with Taylor's Run
Oh
or something
shoot!
similar.
Oh, I forgot about the interlude.
Yeah, well, I'm okay saving the interlude for next episode, only because I think it would make a really good cold open for the next episode. But
Yeah.
I'm tentative on that because I haven't reread the interlude for Arc 4, so I can't remember what that is. But just in reading this, I was like, man, this would just fit so well as the cold open for the next episode. Like I'm just imagining like like if you were to condense it completely, you just are showing like uh bloody footprints and just like knee down as the wards are walking through the halls of the protectorate, walking into what's her name's office, and then it just pans up. Yeah, it pans up to her expressionless face, and just like, you guys look like shit, and then just turn. There they are. Aegis is half a body, bloody as hell, boom, worm right above them. You know, like just something stupid
Director
like that.
Piggot is like, because everybody has their analog.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
Like we're casting Amanda Waller again, right?
Essentially, yeah. It's a very Amanda Waller character.
I can't remember the actress's name off the top of my head. God
Viola,
bless
Viola
her.
Davis? Is it Viola Davis?
Viola Davis.
I think it is Viola Davis. Yeah.
I'm gonna go with Viola. Spiritually, it's Viola Davis.
Michael, could you confirm so we don't sound silly? Amanda Waller from the DC universe. I think it's Viola Davis.
Okay. Well, until we get that back, yeah, that's who I'm gonna go with. I think that's a great opener for the next one.
Okay. Yeah.
But we'll get to that.
And we'll come back to that interlude then. I'm fine with that. Yeah, let's
right,
go ahead. Let's end with some names.
End with some names. So you gotta. Oh, and we are correct. It is Viola Davis.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for confirming what we already know. Arc 1. So episode 1.
Episode 1.
Right now, it's titled Gestation. Which I say, ew, gross.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay, I put zero thought into names.
I have put zero thought into naming these episodes right now.
So okay, we'll go. I'm gonna remember this for the future though.
On the spot.
First episode, I think you go with like, do we go bug related? Like, do we have to go bug themed?
I don't think we go bug themed.
You don't go bug themed?
Because I think Worm is already like, and this goes with the rest of it, Worm is already abstract enough that
That's
like
fair.
It's literally just the title of the show.
Yeah.
You could rename the show something like Capes or
right.
Swarm or something like that.
Right.
You know. Or go the real CW route and go Brockton Bay.
That's actually, I wasn't going to say it. But
the Brockton Bay.
Yeah. That's where my mind went. Oh man, that's funny. That's funny. Yeah. I mean, you could do like a you know what? Let's do a little best. We're here. We got time. We'll cut this if it doesn't make sense and it's bad. All right. So let's just search for
we can always fix it in post.
Fix it in post. That's our answer for everything. Best pilot episode titles. Some website has done a list. Pilot episode titles.
I like literally saying not an origin. Or
half of these are just
pilot.
Are just titled pilot. Okay, that doesn't.
Yeah, figured.
That's funny. Yeah, these aren't too helpful. I was looking more for like theming ideas. How to.
I mean, Girl on Fire is a
yeah. Okay.
Little derivative, but
yeah. Girl on.
Feel that maybe Bully.
Bully
is really good for having a lot of kind of aggressive characters. You've got the actual bullies. You've got Lung. You've got Arms Master.
Yeah. Do like I do like shows that will have themes with their episode titles, where like all the titles are sort of connected in one way or another, or something like that, or connected thematically, not like.
I mean, we could start picking bugs.
Oh, right. Yeah, just doing. Oh man. Oh, okay. Now you're on to something.
Stick with because there's vaguely like a.
I mean, there's a name for every bug in the world.
Yeah, exactly. So but some of the more or like bug things, like obviously you got to throw in a hornet's nest at some point,
right?
You throw in Hive, which I'm pretty sure is already.
I think that is.
One, but like maybe Into the Hive.
Yeah,
would be a good one. Um,
I mean,
yeah.
you could even just go. Yeah, I mean, you could go really obvious and just title it like she uses the Black Widow a lot in that first episode I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, this most recent one, pretty good Black Widow.
Mm-hmm.
Brown Recluse is a pretty good opener, especially considering like learning about Taylor.
Yeah.
And with her,
you could even just call it Recluse, Recluse.
Recluse is pretty good.
Yeah. Just keep that
I
kind
like-
of that bug theme, and
I'm gonna stick that. I'm gonna stick that in there. Tentative.
yeah.
Recluse. And then all right.
We'll come back to it. I like it. That's episode 1.
Workshop that.
Yeah, workshop it. Episode 2.
So right off the top, I have a quote in here.
Okay.
From first part, and it's routines define us.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's something that Taylor says when she's like preparing in the morning, because that's
right.
She is a creature of habit. I kind of like creature of habit.
Creature
or
of habit.
something to that regard.
I don't hate it. I like it.
Always room at the top to cross out and put something else.
Habitat. Just something.
Ooh, habitat's really good. Because that's when we go to the hideout.
I was gonna say we see their lair.
Scratching that off, putting habitat. Oh, because we start off, we kind of see her house and live in it for more than the first episode, it feels like. But
yeah,
at least the I don't know, feels like more lived in that second episode.
Mm-hmm.
All right, third episode. Now here's the kicker.
Okay.
You've got to come up with a name for it, but you've got to come up with an optional second name.
Okay.
Because of part 1 and part 2.
Oh, right. If we split it, of course.
Yeah, if we split this
Right, if we split this episode, episodes 3 and 4, tentatively. You're right. Oh, tricky. Okay. Well, if episode 3 is sort of like the character-driven conversation with Arms Master slash intro to heist, and episode 4 is the heist. So we do like oof. Oh, this is tricky.
I like, and this I'm going to sound way too wild bow when I say this,
Mm-hmm.
but I think for the second half, I like Hatch.
Okay, I don't hate it. I like it.
Partly because like
Hatch a plan.
batten down the hatches for like kind of holding the bank.
Yep.
But then also this is where everything emerges from this episode, I think.
I mean the plan is hatched. I mean there's a lot of ways that makes sense. Okay, Hatch is good. Still, it keeps the bug theme. I'm here for it.
Yeah,
I'm here for
it.
it.
Work as either the second half or the first half.
So then,
second half or the whole thing.
If right, I would say Hatch works. If we are splitting it and Hatch is episode 4 here, then episode 3 thematically would have to be like what am I thinking of? Like not Cocoon's a little too on the nose, but what's the pre-Hatch stage?
The first part could be Hatch, like you said, like hatch a plan, and it's prepping for this next part.
True.
And the second part could be something. Second episode, episode 4, I guess in this case, would be something like Sting, or
yeah, right.
Trying to think of something where kicking people's asses.
I know.
And it's a lot of the underdogs, both literally and figuratively, kicking everybody's asses. They're going up against stronger people. There's more of them, and they somehow whoop all of them.
Yeah.
Which leads me to think something like Ants, or size doesn't matter, or something like that.
Oh, Michael's got a good suggestion here. Keep it in our same sort of train of thought.
Ooh.
Spawn and Sting.
Ooh.
Pretty good.
I like Spawn and Sting. You do Hatch and Spawn.
Hatch and Spawn works.
Hmm.
They kind of they're kind of synonymous, but
Yeah.
and again, we are sort of thinking if this is if we are splitting this.
I'm gonna write those down at the top, Spawn and Sting, just to have them there.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, write it all down. We're revisiting this for sure. We're gonna have to.
Sure.
Probably this is one I'd want to bring in some of the rest of the group
in time, I'm gonna say, probably around episode 10 or something,
Mhm.
when when we figure that out.
Yeah.
We'll figure out like what our timing is for like the episodes and how
Yeah.
many there will be until we find a good stopping point, which I think will probably end up being around episode 10.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe even later than that. But I think, we calculate there what the, look back and go, okay, here's a good theming for naming all of these.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got started on some chapter titles. We've got some more discussion and formatting onto this third, possibly fourth episode, depending on how we choose to break it up. I think we're looking pretty good. Do you have any sort of final thoughts in terms of this arc specifically?
I mean, no, I think this will be. I'm just excited to write all this down.
I know we kind of been piecing it together. We need to start putting it down. And this is also we're opening up to suggestions. Obviously, anybody who's listening who wants to throw some ideas our way. If there's something we totally forgot that you're like, how can you not put this into a TV show? Let us know. We're also open to ideas for chapter titles, things like that. Love to hear your ideas.
I know what the thing that's going to be starting off of this one, because I opened up, the bag of worms, changed it up to say we need to have a little bit more focus on clock blocker, and here you can mark the time is when everything started to deviate and they ruined your show.
Yeah. We'll have to track that.
But we'll start. We're going to end up having like our own multiverse where we're like, okay, here's if we were adapting, that original worm.
Yep.
And then here's how we would be changing it in this vastly different, all because we said clock blocker was cool.
Oh man. We're just prepping for the spin-off shows, that's all. And the what if. That's all we're doing. We're saving some time. Well, thanks again, everybody, for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Stick around for the next episode where we continue this riveting discussion.
Thank you so much for listening. Read along with us at parahumans.wordpress.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you love? What did you hate? Anything you think we missed, etc., as long as it's kind. If you'd like to get in touch, you can find us on Twitter, Threads, Instagram, TikTok, and Reddit at Brocktonbaybc, or click the link in the description.